My name is Noah. I'm 16, and I've spent my entire life in a town where no one dares to celebrate birthdays. If you were just passing through, you'd never notice anything strange. The streets are narrow but neat, lined with faded houses that look as though they've been painted the same dull shades of beige and gray since the 50s. We've got one cafe on the corner that serves bitter coffee and dry muffins, an old park where rusted swings creak when the wind blows, and a school so small you know every face by the time you're 8. Ordinary. That's the word I hear from travelers. Such an ordinary little town. But they don't live here. They don't see what we see. In our town, there's one rule everyone follows. You don't talk about birthdays. You don't plan them, you don't celebrate them, and you definitely don't announce when they're coming. The word itself feels dangerous, like saying it too loudly might invite something terrible into your home. It wasn't always like that. The older folks say that decades ago, there used to be balloons, cakes, music in backyards. But all of that stopped a long time ago. Nobody admits why, but we kids, we know the reason. Because the night after your birthday, people disappear. Not everyone, not every year, but enough that the pattern is impossible to ignore. The adults pretend otherwise. They say the missing moved away, or went to college, or fell in love with someone in another town. They spin stories about people chasing dreams, starting fresh lives, traveling the world. But those are lies, because the truth always leaves fingerprints. I've seen the rooms they leave behind. Beds untouched, closets stripped, candles burned down to black and wax, words scrawled on walls, as if written by hands shaking too hard to form letters properly. The one thing they all share, something unnatural clings to their absence. Clara's brother was one of them. His name was Julian. He was 18, only 2 years older than me. The night before he disappeared, he told Clara he felt like he was being watched. He swore that when he looked outside, he saw someone standing under the street lamp. A tall figure, wrapped in what looked like a long coat or cloak. Not moving, not speaking, just staring. The next morning, Julian was gone. His closet was empty. His bed looked as if no one had slept in it. And on the wall of his room, written in gray smudges that looked like ash, were the words, "I'm going with them." On the floor, scattered in a circle, were charred candle stubs. Clara swore Julian had never bought candles, had never lit one in his life. That's when she changed. Clara used to be the type of girl who laughed at everything. The way our math teacher mispronounced words. The way the stray cat hissed at us when we passed by the park bench acclaimed. After Julian vanished, she stopped smiling. Every conversation was about finding him. Every notebook she carried filled with scribbled theories, clippings from old newspapers, maps of the town marked with dates and names. She promised herself she would find him, or at least find out the truth, and she dragged me along with her. At first, I didn't want to get involved. I thought maybe she was just trying to cope, building some wild conspiracy in her grief. But then she showed me the evidence. The pattern stretched back decades. Every single year, 1 or 2 young people disappeared the night after their birthday. The further we dug, the stranger it got. Old newspapers from the 1950s mentioned runaways. But when Clara compared the photos, she found something chilling. In the background of several of them, grainy, almost hidden in the shadows, you could make out a shape. Tall, thin, cloaked, watching. The same figure Julian had seen. The same figure others whispered about before they vanished. We call him the Watcher. Clara thinks he's not human, that he's part of something older than the town itself. A ritual, maybe some curse. She says those who disappear don't die. They join them, whoever they are. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was scaring herself with old stories. But then she looked me in the eyes and whispered something that froze the blood in my veins. Noah, I saw him. I swallowed hard. Saw who? The Watcher. He was standing under your window last night. Her words stuck in my head like barbed wire. I wanted to believe she was mistaken or lying to get me more involved. But when I got home, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made my stomach twist. At midnight, I forced myself to peek through the curtains. The street below looked empty. No tall man, no shadowy figure. Just the flicker of the lamppost and the quiet hum of crickets. I almost convinced myself she was wrong. Almost. Until the next morning. When I stepped outside, I saw it in the dirt beneath my window. A circle carved into the ground with strange intersecting lines I couldn't decipher. The earth inside was blackened, as though scorched by fire. The grass around it was dead. When I tried to erase it with my foot, the soil crumbled like ash. And then I remembered what tomorrow was. My birthday. I didn't go to school the next day. I told my mom I had a stomach ache, but the truth was I couldn't bring myself to leave the house, not after what I saw under my window. The circle burned into the dirt haunted me more than the idea of the figure itself. A man, even a strange man, could be explained away. But scorched ground? Dead grass? Symbols carved into the earth, as if by an invisible hand? That wasn't something I could shrug off. Clara showed up anyway. She always did. Her mom thought she spent afternoons at the library, but she spent them in my room, covering my desk with clippings, photographs, and her own scrawled notes. She was relentless, a storm of energy that terrified me almost as much as the thing outside. The moment she walked in, she shoved a newspaper into my hands. The date on the masthead was from 1964. The headline read, "Local boy missing, police suspect runaway." At first, nothing unusual. Just another boy, another family shattered, another excuse printed in ink. But Clara jabbed her finger at the photo. "Look, there." I squinted. In the background of the blurry black and white shot, taken outside the family's house, neighbors clustered around, mothers holding their children, stood a shape. At first glance, it could have been a man. But the longer I stared, the less certain I was. The proportions weren't right. Too tall, the head too narrow, the coat or cloak flowing unnaturally, almost blending with the shadows. And then I saw it. The way the face, if it had one, seemed to be tilted up toward a window. Watching. Waiting. "Do you see him?" Clara whispered. Her voice cracked when she spoke. I nodded. I didn't want to, but I couldn't deny it anymore. Clara dropped the paper and gripped my wrists. Her nails dug into my skin as if she wanted to anchor me to the earth. "Listen, Noah, you're not going to vanish. You're not going to leave me like you did. I don't care what this thing is. We're going to stop it." I almost laughed. The idea of us, two kids with nothing but old newspapers and a pile of suspicion, standing against something that had been swallowing people for decades, felt ridiculous. But when I looked at her eyes, wide and burning with a mixture of grief and fury, I couldn't say no. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "Ow!" She released me and pulled another folder from her bag. Inside were diary pages, torn, yellowed, written in shaky cursive. She explained she'd stolen them from her grandmother's attic. Her grandmother had been a teenager in the 1950s, back when the vanishings first started. The entries chilled me. August 12th. I saw him last night. Tall, standing in the orchard. No one believes me. They say I'm imagining things. August 13th. Another girl gone. Her name was Ruth. Her window was open this morning. On her wall, someone had written, "I'm chosen." August 14th. It's happening again tonight. I don't want to sleep. I don't want to dream. If he comes for me, I will fight. The entries ended abruptly. Clara's grandmother never disappeared. She survived, but the missing pages suggested she'd been close. When I looked up, Clara was staring at me, her jaw tight. "See? It's always the same. He appears before the birthday. He leaves a mark. And then, she didn't need to finish. We both knew what came next, but I wasn't ready to admit it. Instead, I muttered, maybe it's just a story. Maybe your grandma." "Stop." Clara's voice snapped like a whip. "Don't you dare dismiss this. You saw the circle. You know it's real. If we do nothing, you'll be gone tomorrow night." Silence pressed between us. The thought of disappearing, of leaving my room empty, my bed untouched, my parents pretending I'd run away, made bile rise in my throat. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, some part of me already did. Finally, Clara leaned back, exhaling sharply. "There's one more thing." She opened her backpack again and pulled out a small metal box. The hinges screeched as she forced it open. Inside lay a bundle of matches and a stub of candle, blackened as though it had been burned halfway through. My chest tightened. "Where did you get that?" Her eyes flickered. "Julian's room. It was hidden under his bed. I think he knew something. I think he tried to prepare." She held the candle out toward me. These aren't just for decoration. It's part of a ritual. The people who vanish, they're not taken randomly. They're chosen. And they leave behind fire because that's how the Watcher marks the passage. I recoiled from the candle as though it might ignite in her hands. So what? I'm supposed to burn one too? Clara shook her head. No, you're supposed to resist. We're going to find him before he finds you. We're going to stop this. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they filled me with dread. Because how do you fight something you don't understand? How do you stop a ritual older than your grandparents? A figure that's been haunting this town for generations. Clara must have seen the fear in my face because she reached out and grabbed my hand. Her grip was steady, grounding. Promise me, Noah. Promise you won't give in. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like it was closing, but I forced the words out anyway. I promise. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We tried to act normal. Ate sandwiches in silence. Walked through the park like we always did, though both of us kept glancing at the shadows as if expecting to see him there. When I finally lay in bed that night, I couldn't keep still. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian's wall. I'm going with them. And then I heard it. A sound outside my window. Soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. Then sharper, deliberate. A scraping sound, as if something heavy was dragging across the pavement. My heart pounded. My body screamed at me not to look. But slowly, trembling, I pushed myself up and peered through the curtain. And there he was, tall, motionless, wrapped in darkness. His head tilted upward, staring straight at me. The Watcher. And tomorrow was my birthday. I don't remember how long I stood there, paralyzed, staring down at him. The figure didn't move. He didn't shift or raise his hand or step forward. He just watched. It was almost worse than if he'd attacked. His stillness felt deliberate, like he had all the time in the world, as though my fear itself was part of the ritual. My breath fogged against the cold glass, and I was terrified that if I exhaled too hard, he'd hear it and climb inside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake my parents, shake them, force them to look, but some instinct told me it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't see. No adult ever did. That was part of the horror of it. We were alone in this. Eventually, I backed away from the window and sat on the edge of my bed, knees pulled to my chest, rocking slightly as though I could shake his image from my mind. I didn't sleep. At some point, the first gray light of dawn seeped into my room. I didn't have the courage to check if he was still there. Only when Clara banged on my front door did I finally move. She took one look at my face and knew. You saw him. I nodded numbly. My throat felt raw, as if I'd spent the night screaming, though I hadn't made a sound. She didn't waste time. She grabbed my arm and yanked me outside. Come on. The air was damp, heavy with dew. I tried not to look at the spot where he'd stood, but Clara crouched down immediately, scanning the ground. And that's when I saw it. Beneath my window, carved into the dirt, was a symbol. A circle intersected by jagged lines, almost like a star but broken in places. The earth inside it was black, scorched as though a fire had burned there, though nothing around it was touched. The grass along the edges had withered into brittle straw overnight. My stomach turned. I had seen photos of similar marks in Clara's folders, but seeing one fresh, directly beneath my window, was different. It was personal. She traced the air above it with her finger, careful not to touch. It's the same as Julian's, she whispered. The same as all of them. I stepped back, suddenly afraid that just standing too close might curse me further. What does it mean? Clara rose, brushing dirt from her knees. Her face was pale, her jaw tight. It's the invitation. I blinked at her. Invitation. She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the circle. The Watcher marks the chosen. It's his way of saying, you belong to us now. My stomach twisted. Us. Clara looked at me finally, her expression grim. Not just him. Them. I hated the way she said it. Like the word itself carried weight, something ancient and unspoken. The same word Julian had scrawled. I'm going with them. We didn't talk much on the walk back inside. My parents were in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling on their phones, blissfully unaware that the shadow of something inhuman had hovered over their son's bed all night. I wanted to scream at them, to beg them to believe me, but when my mom asked casually if I felt better and if I wanted toast, the words died in my throat. It was exactly as Clara had warned. They wouldn't see. After breakfast, Clara and I barricaded ourselves in my room with the blinds drawn tight. She spread her research across the floor. Yellowed news clippings, torn diary pages, handwritten notes. My carpet looked like the inside of a detective's office. "This symbol," she said, tapping a sketch she'd made of circle with jagged lines. "It's older than the disappearances. I found drawings in the margins of my grandma's diary. She said she'd seen it carved into trees in the old park when she was a kid. That means it's been here even longer. Decades. Maybe longer than the town itself." I swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" Her eyes flashed. "We fight back." The words sounded brave, but what do they really mean? Against what? Against him? Against them? That afternoon, Clara dragged me to the library. We dug through archives, flipping through brittle pages of forgotten town records. Most of it was useless. Property deeds, weather reports, old photographs of smiling mayors at ribbon cuttings. But then Clara found something. A mention buried in the minutes of a town council meeting from 1952. Concern grows over the continued vanishings. Citizens whisper of the Watcher and a pact sealed long ago. The council advises silence on the matter, for fear that speaking his name invites his gaze. A pact. I felt cold all over. "What kind of pact?" I whispered. Clara slammed the book shut. "The kind where someone traded lives for something else. And now we're paying the price." We left the library with more questions than answers. The sun dipped low, the sky streaked with purple and red. I felt the weight of the night pressing down already. That evening, Clara insisted on staying with me. She said she wasn't letting me face him alone. We sat on my bed, a candle flickering between us, the one she'd taken from Julian's room. Its flame bent and danced strangely, as though a breath we couldn't feel was moving it. Hours passed. We tried to distract ourselves with whispered jokes, card games, anything to ignore the dread. But as the clock crept closer to midnight, the air in my room grew heavier. And then we heard it, a sound like fingernails dragging slowly down the outside wall. Both of us froze. The candle's flame sputtered violently, nearly going out. Clara grabbed my hand, so tightly her nails cut into my skin. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. The scraping stopped. Silence. And then 3 deliberate knocks on my window. Not the glass, not the frame, but on the air itself, as though someone was knocking on the space between. I forced myself to look. Through the sliver in the blinds, I saw him. The Watcher, taller than before, closer now, his shadow filling my vision. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if listening to the beat of my heart. And beneath the window, the mark burned faintly in the dark, glowing with embers that hadn't been there before. The knocks echoed long after they stopped, reverberating inside my skull like a drumbeat. Clara's nails were still digging into my hand. I could feel her trembling. For once, she wasn't the fierce girl with folders of evidence and endless determination. She was just as terrified as me. We didn't move for what felt like hours. Finally, the candle sputtered again, steadied, and I dared to breathe. When I peeked through the blinds, the street was empty. The Watcher was gone, but the symbol beneath my window glowed faintly, as if embers were buried beneath the earth. We didn't sleep. We couldn't. Instead, Clara opened her bag and pulled out another stack of papers. "I wasn't going to show you this yet," she whispered. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with urgency. "But you need to know what we're dealing with." She spread out photocopies of a handwritten manuscript. The ink was faded, the script curling in old-fashioned loops. "What is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It's from the town archives, hidden in the basement in a locked cabinet. I only found it last month. It's dated 1899. My skin prickled. That was nearly 60 years before the first disappearance we knew of. Clara pointed to a passage she'd highlighted in yellow. "And so the bargain was struck that once each year, one of our young shall be chosen, marked by flame and shadow, taken into their fold. In return, our town shall prosper, our harvests never fail, and our children, those who remain, shall live untouched by plague or famine. This is the covenant of the Watcher and his kin." My stomach churned. "You're saying this town agreed to it?" Clara's lips tightened. Our great-grandparents sold us out. They made a deal. As long as one is taken each year, the rest survive. That's why the adults pretend not to see. They're protecting themselves. Her words struck me like a hammer. Suddenly so much made sense. The silence, the lies, the way no parent ever demanded answers. No police ever found clues. The adults weren't blind. They were complicit. They knew. I whispered. They've always known. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but her jaw hardened. Which means if we want to survive, we can't rely on them. We have to break the pact ourselves. The idea was impossible. How could two kids destroy something that had held power for more than a century? But the thought of surrendering, of joining the long line of the vanished, was unbearable. So I nodded. Ow! Clara turned to the last page of the manuscript. The handwriting there was messier, rushed. And should the chosen refuse, should they defy the call, the watcher's hold may be weakened. The fire that binds must be extinguished, the mark erased. But beware, for to fight the covenant is to draw their wrath. Few have tried. None are remembered. Clara tapped the page. This is it. This is the key. If we destroy the mark, if we put out the flame, maybe we can break it. I stared at the glowing symbol outside my window. The idea of stepping into that circle made bile rise in my throat, but what choice did I have? The rest of the day was a blur. We bought supplies from the hardware store, shovels, salt, a bucket we could fill with water. The cashier, Mr. Lyle, gave us a strange look, but didn't say anything. Maybe he knew. Maybe everyone knew. By evening, Clara and I stood outside my window, staring down at the blackened earth. The glow had faded in daylight, but the air above it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. Ready? Clara asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. We poured water over the circle first. Steam hissed upward, the smell of scorched earth filling our nostrils. Then we shoveled dirt onto it, covering the lines until the mark was hidden. Finally, Clara sprinkled salt across the patch. For a moment, nothing happened. I dared to hope. Then the ground trembled. The soil split, cracks zigzagging outward from the circle. A sound like distant thunder rumbled beneath our feet. Clara grabbed my arm as the earth shifted violently. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The ground stilled. The air was silent again. We stared at each other, wide-eyed. Had it worked? That night, I almost convinced myself we'd done it. Clara fell asleep on my floor, clutching Julian's candle like a talisman. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence outside. No scraping, no knocks, no watcher. But just before dawn, I woke to a smell. Smoke. I bolted upright. The candle Clara had left unlit was burning. Its wax melted down the sides, though neither of us had touched a match. The flame burned black, twisting unnaturally, throwing shadows across the walls. And then I heard it. A voice, whispering from the corner of the room. Not loud, not clear. Just one word, repeated over and over, in a voice that sounded like 100 voices speaking at once. Chosen. The circle outside might have been buried, but the watcher wasn't gone. He was closer than ever. The whispering didn't stop. It seeped into every corner of the room, vibrating against the walls, threading itself into my veins. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it was inside me now. Chosen. 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 The voices sounded like they came from underground, from the soil itself, as though the earth was full of the people who'd vanished before me, their mouths filled with dirt, but still chanting. Clara jolted awake at my gasp. Her eyes darted to the candle. The black flame writhed like a snake, bending toward us. She grabbed it and tried to blow it out, but the fire didn't flicker. It only grew taller, darker, splitting into two twisting tongues. I knocked it out of her hand. It rolled across the floor and hit the wall, still burning even though it wasn't upright. That was when we realized the fire wasn't consuming the wax anymore. The wax was gone, but the flame remained, floating, clinging to nothing. Clara cursed under her breath and kicked it, hard, sending it skittering into the corner. It hit the wall with a dull thud, and for the first time, the flame sputtered and died. The voices stopped. Silence pressed against my eardrums. My chest heaved as if I'd run a mile. Clara wiped sweat from her forehead and whispered, "He's angry." We heard him. I wanted to believe that was a good thing, that making him angry meant we had power. But when I looked at Clara's face, I saw no triumph there, only dread. We tried to rest after that, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined opening them to see the Watcher standing in the room. At dawn, we left the house. Neither of us could stand the walls anymore. The town looked the same as always. Mothers herding kids to school, shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks, cars humming lazily down the streets. Ordinary, blissfully unaware. But I couldn't shake the feeling that behind every curtain, every polite smile, people knew. They knew about the pact. They knew what tomorrow meant. And they didn't care. Clara seemed to sense my thoughts. "They're in on it," she muttered. "The whole town. That's why no one speaks out. That's why no parent fights. If you're not the chosen one, you keep your mouth shut and pray it's not your kid next year." Her words made bile rise in my throat. I wanted to scream at the world, at every adult who pretended we were safe. Instead, I followed Clara to the one place she said we might find answers, the old church at the edge of town. It had been abandoned for decades. Its steeple leaned, shingles missing from the roof, the windows boarded. No one went near it anymore. My mom used to tell me it was unsafe, that the floorboards would collapse if we stepped inside. But when Clara pried one of the boards loose and slipped through, I didn't hesitate. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mildew. The pews were splintered, the altar crumbling, but faint carvings lined the walls. Circles, symbols, the same ones burned into the earth beneath my window. We followed the carvings deeper to the basement. There in the damp stone room beneath the church stood something that made my skin crawl. A table blackened by fire. Around it, melted stubs of candles arranged in a circle. And etched into the stone floor was the largest version of the mark I'd ever seen. Clara knelt beside it, running her fingers over the grooves. This is where it began. I didn't want to touch it, but something in me drew closer. My hand brushed against the stone, and a jolt of heat shot through me. I staggered back, clutching my palm. When I looked down, a blister had already formed in the center of my skin. Clara's eyes widened. "He marked you again." I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because in that moment, I felt something else. A whisper, not in my ears, not in the room, but in my mind. "Why fight, Noah? You were chosen. This is a gift." The voice was different from the chanting before. It was smoother, almost comforting, like honey poured into my skull. "Join us. You'll never grow old. You'll never suffer. You'll belong." I shook my head violently, trying to push it out. "No," I muttered, not realizing I'd said aloud. Clara grabbed me by the shoulders. "What did you hear?" I hesitated, then told her. Every word made her face pale further. She pressed her lips tight and whispered, "That's what Julian said before he disappeared. He told me he'd been hearing them, that they promised him peace, that he didn't have to be afraid anymore." I shivered. Was that what the message on his wall had meant? I'm going with them. Not forced, not dragged, but convinced. Suddenly, the pact didn't seem like just a bargain between the Watcher and the town. It was a seduction. We fled the church as the sun dipped low, leaving the basement behind. But the whisper didn't leave me. It curled in the back of my mind, patient, persuasive. That night, Clara stayed again. We locked the windows, piled furniture against the door, as if any of that would matter. At midnight, the scratching returned. This time, not just at the window, but along the walls, the floor, the ceiling, like dozens of hands dragging nails across wood. And then came the knock. Not 3 times, not gentle, but a thunderous pounding, shaking the glass, rattling the bed frame. Clara screamed, and over the roar of sound, I heard the voice again, clearer than ever. "Noah, it's time to choose." The night pressed against my bedroom window like a suffocating weight. The air itself felt brittle, as though one wrong breath could shatter it. I hadn't slept since the cemetery. None of us had. The memory of the whispering graves and the way the figure had seemed to stretch into the sky haunted every flicker of shadow. But now the shadows weren't just haunting me. They were waiting. Tomorrow, I would turn 17. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole life dreading my 16th birthday, convinced that would be the night I vanished. I thought if I survived it, I'd be safe. But the rules were different. I'd seen too much. And worse, I'd taken something from them. The diary of Elise rested beneath my pillow like a live wire. Her final words, they gave me a choice, looped in my head over and over until they no longer sounded like hers. They sounded like a voice whispering directly into me. And then the whisper became real. Noah. I froze. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside the room. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. At first, I saw nothing but the familiar clutter of my desk, the half-drawn curtains, the outline of the bookshelf. But then, in the corner by the wardrobe, the dark seemed thicker than it should have been. It bent, twisted like smoke caught in a jar. And from that smoke, a shape unfurled. The tall figure. The one we'd chased through the streets. The one that haunted every window. Now it was here, inches from me. Its cloak brushed the floor, but it didn't move like fabric. It swam, rippling, as though it were alive. I wanted to scream, but my voice had dried into sand. You've seen too much, it said. The voice was not a single tone, but hundreds, layered and out of sync, like a crowd speaking at once. You've read the words. You've touched what was forbidden. And now the choice is yours. My legs refused to move, but my thoughts spun. This was what Elise meant. The choice. What choice? I forced out. My voice cracked like broken glass. The figure leaned closer, and though it had no face, I could feel its attention like a hot blade against my skin. To remain, or to join. To fade into the lie of this town, or to become truth. Behind the figure, the air warped. I saw shapes flicker in and out. Faces stretched and hollow, mouths opening in silent cries. One of them looked agonizingly familiar. I stumbled back, clutching the desk for balance. Clara's brother, I whispered. The figure tilted its head. He chose, as all must. Anger surged through my fear, boiling over like fire. He didn't choose. None of them did. You took them. The figure's cloak quivered, like laughter without sound. We offer, they accept. The candle burns, the shadow answers. Some resist. Few resist long. My mind reeled. Candle. Birthday. The ritual. That was why the candles in Clara's brother's room had burned to stubs, why Elise's diary mentioned fire. It wasn't about the day. It was about the offering. And tomorrow, I would be forced to make it. The figure extended something from its cloak. Not a hand, but a long, crooked shard of darkness that gleamed faintly, like obsidian. It hovered inches from my chest. You can refuse, it said. Remain a child among the blind. Live in a lie until your breath withers. But you will always see us. You will always know we are here. Watching. Waiting. And you will never sleep in peace again. The shard trembled, lowering slightly. Or, the room dissolved around me. Suddenly, I was standing in the park. The swings moved though no wind blew. Shapes shifted between the trees. Too many legs, too many arms. The shadows thickened until they formed a circle, and in the center, I saw all of them. Every person who had vanished. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers. Their lips moved in unison, chanting words I couldn't understand. Among them, Clara's brother. His face was pale, stretched thin, but his eyes were alive. He looked right at me. Join, he whispered, though his mouth barely moved. Or be hunted. The vision snapped. I was back in my room, knees buckling beneath me. The figure loomed, silent, waiting. I knew now what Elise had meant. The choice wasn't freedom or death. It was blindness or truth. Isolation or belonging. Madness or surrender. And in 24 hours, they would demand my answer. When the figure finally dissolved into nothing, I collapsed onto the bed, drenched in sweat. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the ceiling until dawn's weak light crept into the room. Tomorrow was my birthday. Tomorrow, everything would end. Or begin. The morning of my birthday felt wrong from the moment I opened my eyes. The sunlight filtering through the curtains was pale, sickly, as if it, too, was afraid of this day. My phone buzzed with well-meaning messages from classmates and neighbors. Happy birthday, Noah. Words that felt like nails being driven into a coffin. Mom made pancakes. Dad kissed my forehead. They smiled like everything was normal, but their eyes kept drifting toward me, lingering too long. I wondered if they knew, if all parents knew, if that's why no one spoke about the missing, because they weren't missing at all. They were chosen. By nightfall, my room was lit with a single candle. It wasn't intentional. The power had gone out across the neighborhood, plunging every house into shadow. I sat at my desk, staring at the flickering flame, remembering what the figure had said. The candle burns, the shadow answers. I wanted to smash it, to snuff it out, to run. But my legs wouldn't obey. My heart pounded in my ears. The candle's flames stretched higher, bending, twisting, until it no longer looked like fire at all. It looked like a hand, reaching. And then the shadows came. They slid along the walls like water, filling the corners, swallowing the furniture. My door creaked open, though I hadn't touched it. From the hallway, voices poured in. Not human voices, but the layered, broken chorus I'd heard before. Noah. It wasn't a call. It was a verdict. The tall figure stepped into the room, its form bending the air like heat above asphalt. The candle's flame hissed and guttered, but didn't die. "It is time," it said. I shook my head violently, tears stinging my eyes. "I never asked for this. I don't want." "You saw." The voices overlapped. "You read." You carried her words. "And now you must choose." Behind the figure, the room warped. The wall peeled open like wet paper, revealing the park. The swings moved. The shadows circled. And there, the lost ones. Elise, Clara's brother. Dozens more. Their glowing eyes locked on me, chanting soundlessly. "Join us," Elise whispered. Her lips didn't move, but the words rattled in my skull. The figure extended its shard of darkness, the same blade of shadow as before. "Take it and belong." I backed toward the window, my hand fumbling at the latch. My only thought was escape. Jump, run, anything but this. But when I pulled the window open, there was no street outside. No houses. No sky. Only endless black, rippling like the inside of a lung. It closed the world around me. Panic ripped through me. "Why me?" I screamed, voice breaking. The figure tilted its head, and for the first time, I thought I heard a single, true voice among the thousands. Calm, patient, almost kind. "Because you looked." The shard hovered inches from my hand. I could feel its cold humming in my bones, tempting and terrifying. Behind it, Elise's face surfaced through the shadows. She looked almost human again for a moment, her eyes pleading. "It's not the end," she said. "It's just another way of being." I don't know what part of me broke then, the fearful part or the rational one. My hand rose, trembled, hovered, and then I blew out the candle. Darkness swallowed everything. No light, no figure, no room, only silence. But in that silence, I heard it, a low, endless breath. Not mine, not human. The town itself exhaling, drawing me into its lungs. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the park. The shadows circled me, pressing close, their mouths wide, their eyes burning. In the center of the circle, the figure waited. The shard was gone. Instead, its cloak opened wide, revealing only blackness, deeper than night. The chanting grew louder, louder, until it was unbearable. My body moved without my command, stepping toward that impossible dark. The last thing I saw before I was swallowed whole was Elise. She mouthed two words, silently, her expression carved in sorrow. "I'm sorry." And then I was gone. The next morning, the town woke up to news of another missing teen. My parents wept, the neighbors whispered, and the cycle continued. No one asked why. No one ever did. Because they all knew. Because in our town, on your 17th birthday, the shadows always come.